Great, Tanshi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Building Better Relations webinar. My name is Jordyn. I'm hosting this panel tonight with you guys. Very excited for this discussion we're going to have. Miigwech for being here, for sharing your wisdom, and for participating in this discussion. I'm going to pass it on to George Hertzgrove to begin this discussion.
Thank you, Jordyn. So just as a bit of introduction, I'm with the Ottawa Seniors Pride Network, and we've been around now in Ottawa for about 12 years. We started very much like Assembly of Seven Generations. A small group of people got together and said, hey, we're old queer people. We really, should get together and help each other out because we ain't getting any younger, and eventually we'll end up in seniors residences, and we know how awful they are and things like that. So we started about 12 years ago, and there's Bill who's joining the panel. Great. So anyways, that's organization. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history, as Daryl mentioned in our sort of pre-talk, because history is important, and especially the history of the LGBT community in Ottawa. The LGBT community in Ottawa is somewhat unique in the global scheme of things. It started essentially back, our sort of modern history started back around the late 50s and early 60s. And what happened then was that a lot of LGBT people, they worked for the government, or they were in the military and that sort of thing. And the government, in its infinite wisdom, decided that they really have got to get rid of all of those gay people in the government, in the military, and the police. And what they did is they contracted with Carleton University to try and find these people, to get rid of them, fire them, whatever they could do. And this never happened in any other place in Canada except for Ottawa. So they developed what they called the fruit machine. And there is a documentary on the fruit machine that a friend of mine put together. We talked about it for many years, and she finally got to make this documentary. And for those who are interested, because people would not believe that this happened in Canada. Not a lot like they don't believe how a lot of our Indigenous people were treated in Canada. But it's a similar type of thing. This is a lot of history, Canadian history, especially Ottawa history, that people do not know. So I encourage all of you, get on YouTube, go search out the fruit machine and watch that documentary. It's about an hour. It will blow your mind away. So that is one of the things. So what happened during that time is they tried to find all of the people who were in the government, in the military, and get rid of them. And this continued on till up into the 90s, although officially it wasn't there, but it really was. And this is why a couple of years ago, the Prime Minister stood up in the House of Commons and did this huge apology to the LGBT community for all the past wrongs. So that's a little bit about the history. And again, as Peter mentioned earlier, around 1970, 71, I believe, a few of us got up. It was just a bit before my time of coming out. A few people, certainly people that are still in Ottawa Senior Pride Network, went up to Parliament Hill and had this demand, the We Demand. And you'll see that there's actually along Bank Street a mural called We Demand. And basically it was our community saying, we've had enough, we're not going to be treated like this anymore. And these are our demands to be treated as equals, as humans. Well, we all know that that didn't happen overnight. It took many, many years for us to get equal marriage and things like that. It took years to not be discriminated against in housing and employment, and you just could be fired for being gay. You could be denied housing. It took many years, but we have made a lot of advances. So that's one of the sort of historical things of Ottawa, which a lot of people don't know about. So I thought that was important to bring out tonight and let people know about it. And I have another little thing I want to talk about later, but I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pass it over to Holly and let her share a bit about whatever she wants to do. I mean, we're trying to keep it sort of along a historical theme, but that's not necessary. It can be about anything. So Holly, it's your turn.
Okay, thanks very much, George. So, so history is something I've always been very interested in, because I think it does tell us, what we should do and not do. We have to understand our history before we can sort of make the right decisions going forward sometimes. So as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Brandon, Manitoba. And of course, both Manitoba and Saskatchewan has a very robust Indigenous populations, and we went to school with kids. Brandon has the awful stigma of having the residential school there, and I went to school with kids that had to live in that situation. I remember the first time I understood Indigenous stigma, I think, was when I was pretty little. We used to go sliding on something called the North Hill, which was just beyond this Brandon Residential School building. And, and I would all the time say to my mom and dad, like, where are the kids from the school? They should be here sliding down the hill and playing with us. Where are they? And this really upset me because I couldn't understand. I really couldn't understand it. It was a free hill. Everybody was out having fun. They were never there. And they could never give me, an answer that I understood or felt comfortable with. So, I mean, I think this is something that I grew up with. My family, I'll just talk a little bit about that context, because I think it helps, in terms of our own context, really help in terms of what we do as adults. And I'm 70 now. So that means that I was grew up in the 60s and 70s, teenager and a young adult, and that period of time. So in that period of time, it was culturally, we were questioning so many things. Question authority, first of all, but there was the civil rights movement. There was, rock and roll was happening, the Beatles, feminism was arising. So hippies, Woodstock, all of that kind of thing. So it was a situation where there was turmoil culturally and socially, and people were just, really questioning so many things that they've been told and taught. So it was a very active time.
So I think Holly's frozen.
Yes, I think so.
So I imagine she will go out and come back in. That's normally what people do.
Yeah, I'm assuming that. So while Holly is going out and coming back in, hopefully, Uh,
Sure. So actually, we're just gonna pass it over to Jordyn. Jordyn's just hosting the panel, so Jordyn can take over.
Yeah, so I guess while we're waiting, I was thinking maybe we can just pass it on to Lisa for now, and then we'll go back to Holly afterwards, whenever she's ready. So Lisa, I'm just passing it over to you if you'd like to share a bit about Ottawa's LGBT history. And you're on mute, by the way.
There we go. All right. Well, I guess up until up until the last 6 months, I really didn't belong to a community. I'm Two-Spirit. I am Two-Spirit, and I just I belong now because I the meetups and things like that. I join meetups and things like that. And I guess I know, like, with, I'm in my mid 50s, so like, yes, I know, like, when I was younger, yeah, it was a time where people didn't accept the LGBTQ. That was for sure, and it just wasn't talked about, or like when I was 20, 30, or teenager, and so yeah, so but I like I see now, like, I guess like being in, and I guess I grew up, like, outside of Ottawa, like in the Kempville area on a farm, so in a more secluded area, in a little village, so yeah, so I guess, like, moving to Ottawa in the when I was 20, that's when I first experienced they had, they had a couple of gay bars. I think at that time, I think there was like one, like, or maybe two. and I remember that, and and I guess then I just got into working and whatnot, and just I guess I like I guess I pretended that I was the only one that was like that. I don't know, but anyways, I mean, like, it seems to be different, like, that's probably why, like, in the last 6 months, I've decided to, like, you know what, I'm different, I need to explore that, and and I certainly have the time now because I'm not working, I'm retired, and I want to be who I am. I want to be, I'm Two-Spirit, and I want to be comfortable, be who I am, and be around other people who are, Two-Spirit, LGBTQ as well. And I seem to be doing that. I seem to be moving in that direction. So, and yeah, so I need to, I'm acknowledging that part of myself, right? So, and I see things are, like, much different, like, from the past. I mean, like, when I was 20, I mean, things have come pretty far, a lot further, so that is for sure. Yeah, so yeah, I go, yeah, so I don't, like, I attend groups, virtuals with LGBTQ, and go on events, and like, Well, I'm okay. I feel okay with that. I feel like, well, you know, that there are other people like that, that's like myself, and I want to be, I want to be part of it. I want to be around it because I lived mostly a life of not being around, the LGBTQ community, and I'm finding now that I have and started to, do that in the last 6 months. I seem a lot more happier. Yeah, so that's how I see it. I see people are more like, kind of have the same outlook kind of thing, and I kind of like that because, I thought I was the only one, and the rest of society, can be pretty hard and cold, and I was like around that for so many years, and now I'm moving back to, immersing myself with the LGBT community, and I feel good. You know, I feel good. I don't know what else to say other than that. Yeah.
Thank you much, Lisa. I was wondering if maybe you would like to just expand a bit on how you find, I guess, just the Ottawa community in general, or just the LGBT community in general, comparing now to about 20 years ago.
That might be something that Bill could talk about.
Yeah, if Lisa would like to pass it to Bill, that's okay too.
Yeah, I can answer it, and pass the mic. Yeah, so in comparison, well, I feel like a really big difference. I feel a really big difference because back when I was 20 years old, I mean, it just wasn't talked about. And if it, and you knew people, like if you were different, you knew people were talking about it. Oh, well, she's different, and whatever. And you just, and if you did have a friend or something that you hung around or had the same interests or whatever, it all had to be hidden. It all had to be hidden. So like, it was like, yeah, so I would have to say like, there's a big, huge difference because I don't feel now, I don't feel like I have to hide, and I don't feel like I have to, I just don't feel that now. I don't feel I have to, I know, like, when they said, well, if you want to mute or take your picture off, and then I was thinking to my, because they said it was being recorded, and I was thinking, well, should I do it or not? And I thought, well, why? I don't need to. I don't need to. I don't want to hide anymore. I don't need to hide. I don't need to, like, just to accept, like everyone's different, and like to be all treated equal. I think that's fair. Just to leave it like that, and yeah. Okay, so I can pass the mic to, was it somebody else in particular?
Yeah,
Anybody?
miigwech, Lisa, for sharing that. It's definitely a really, really beautiful thing to be able to connect to your identity and really embrace it. I am very happy that you were able to do that and to find that sense of belonging. And yeah, just to pass over to Bill, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your pronouns, however you'd like to present yourself, take it away.
Thank you. First, I need to start off by apologizing for being late. I got caught up in something and lost track of the time. It's kind of ironic that George should be talking about the We Demand, because what I'm working on actually is an art project around the We Demand anniversary. And it's catching the light there. This is a representation of the speeches that were made on Parliament Hill, and then it ends with a reminder about the We Demand. And the part in the center is comparing two historic events. one that George alluded to the time after the Second World War, when there was the great concern about security and the Cold War between the US and Russia. There was this concern about security. And one of the things that the police did, in addition to the fruit machine that George was talking about here locally, the police got a map of the city, of the streets of the city, and they would place red dots on the map wherever queer people gathered or lived or recreated or hung out. And after a little while, this map got really full of dots because we're all over the place. And so they threw the map away and said, okay, that's not working. Let's get a bigger map. That's the problem. And they proceeded then to put the dots on the map again. And when you do the same thing over and over again and you expect different results, you're often disappointed. And sure enough, the map was unreadable because of these dots. So they threw it away and they got an even bigger one. And they started again with the dots. And then somebody said, wait, this isn't going to work. Let's find other ways to harass these people. And so the center part of the art project that I'm working on references those dots on the one corner, but on the other side references how things have changed. And that's best illustrated by the fact that you can walk down Bank Street and there are 40 banners with the faces and names of queer people who helped mobilize the organization. So we've gone from the police hiding behind newspapers and skulking in corners and behind trees trying to figure out where we are, to putting ourselves right out on the street. Here we are. We're proud. We're not ashamed of ourselves. We belong here. This is our city as well as yours. And so it just was coincidental that some of what George was talking about was the very thing I was working on that caused me to be late. By way of introduction, I use the pronouns he, him, but I'm open to just about any kind of a reference that's meant with respect. I've lived here in Ottawa for a little over 30 years. I came from the East Coast. I grew up mostly in St. John, New Brunswick, which is a small working man's town, laborer's town, a lot of shipbuilding, a lot of construction, those sorts of things. And like Lisa, I recognized there was at a point in my life that I was different from other people. But in my case, I suppressed that. I didn't want for it to be true. And at the same time that I was going through that discovery, I had a lot of excess weight. So it became a way for me to avoid facing who I was by assuming all of my problems were about my weight. But then I lost the weight and I had to face the fact that for the first time in my life as a young adult, women began to be attracted to me, but I was not attracted back to them. But I still didn't want the other explanation to be true. And so I got married and thought, okay, I can do this. And for 20 years, I did a pretty good job of keeping up my end of the bargain. But in the year 2000, things changed and I came out at the age of 45. And so I'm fond of saying that coming out was my millennial year project. I became gay for the millennium. And like Lisa was describing, because this would have been in 2000, there were a number of bars at that time. I think I came out in sort of the last hurrah of the queer community in Ottawa. There were 8 or 9 bars you could go to at that point in time. And sometimes on a Saturday night, I'd start at the Lookout and then I'd head to Central Station and then to Icon or stop at Polo, maybe hit the Edge, go to Icon, and with some help, wander my way over to CP's or Frankie's on Frank if it was still open at the time, or Bottoms Up it became eventually. But gradually over the years, of course, each of those have gone by the wayside, and now there's only a couple of spots in terms of bars. But at the same time that those things were disappearing, a lot of groups and organizations were coming together, expanding, trying to fill in that gap. And so it's shifted what there was to do. I spend a lot of my time now that I'm retired from work involved in the arts community. And one of the real joys for me is that there's a very vibrant queer art center here in the city. Not a center in terms of a building, a center in terms of a collection of robust artists. And there are a couple of folks trying to pull art organizations together. There's a group called Quart, which is a queer arts organization that's trying to bring more performers to the city or create more venues for queer performers. And there's quite a number of queer artists showing their work in the city, including a good number of Two-Spirit artists as well. So I'm involved a lot with organizations that are doing that kind of work, as well as collecting their work myself. And then sometimes with Holly and George, we wander out to some of the local high schools and we do a queer history meetup with folks, do a presentation on the kinds of things that George was mentioning, that Holly was mentioning, that have happened over the city, to help people contextualize the conditions that we have today. Those things all came from something. Somebody had some bright idea this was how to solve a problem, whether it was with dots or fruit machines or security checks or things. But yeah, there was always an idea behind it, and it's helpful to know what that history, what that idea was, because it equips us for what will happen in the future. One of the ironies, I did a previous art project around the red dot thing, where I was gluing crystals onto a street map of the city. And while I was working on that, it occurred to me that it was a bit ironic that 30, 40, 50 years ago, the police were trying to figure out where we were so they could keep track of us and surveil our activities and curtail us where necessary. And we fought against that, got our rights, our freedoms, our ability to live more openly. And then we turned around and got involved in social media, so that now I'm identifying all my queer friends by linking them to my accounts. I'm telling you where I go by what I shop for and what events I take. So if you want to surveil the queer community, we've made it 10 times easier than it ever was before. But all that said and done, we do live in a fortunate country in that we have some of our rights, but there are still things to be fixed. There's a huge amount of work still to be done. As free as I am from discrimination in housing, I'm still afraid to walk down the street holding a boy's hand. So it's a mixed set of circumstances, and it's easy to get comfortable and think that the work is done, when in fact there's still a lot to demand. And I'll just wrap up by repeating one of the quotes that is in the speech on We Demand, and that's that where they summed it up by saying, we're fed up with, I get the exact wording right here, we're fed up with the lack of respect due to all human beings. And I think that's the important thing for us to cling to. Until we're all safe, none of us are really safe. Until we all have equal rights, none of us really have equal rights. Until we're all protected and free to live our lives openly and without shame and persecution, none of us are really free, because all of that is something given, and things that are given can be taken away. So yeah, that's my little 5 minutes here, and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, miigwech, Marcy Bill. Yeah, I think I think you shared some pretty powerful stuff. I definitely felt when you were talking about how there's still some concerns in the Ottawa community for safety. As a person that's been pretty privileged in my white passingness, and just being able to walk down the street without having to really worry about that. And then on the other hand, understanding that violence can happen if I were to turn to more a visibly genderqueer individual, or if I were to hold a partner's hand and we were visibly a queer couple. I think that's something that's worth mentioning, and I thank you for bringing that up. And I also just wanted to ask, your art project, was that on a skateboard?
Yes, yeah, a fundraiser for a skateboard park here in the city, and so yeah, it was an opportunity to use the fundraiser to get a message out there and represent the queer community. It's not a queer fundraiser in and of itself. There'll be a lot of straight people there, so it's an opportunity to share a message and open some minds.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really powerful piece. Thank you much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
And now I'm just gonna pass it on over to Holly. No, don't worry about the internet. That's expected on Zoom. Yeah. You're muted.
Thanks very much, Jordyn. Yeah, I just, we were talking a little bit about history, and in terms of the age that we're at, like the seniors queer community in Ottawa, we've been through really a lot historically. And I mean, when I think about it, we were at the time that I was in my teenage and young adult life, we were criminally, we were criminals. We were thought to be mentally ill because we were deviant. And that didn't change until the 70s, So these things are, the church had a tremendous influence on society that has changed, evolved over the years. Thankfully, we've seen a lot of that. But this is the upbringing we kind of lived with, and certainly in terms of being a woman and a feminist, growing up in the conservative prairies, I was very happy that I was growing up in a supportive family that was actually big L and small L liberal. So, and that was an anomaly. Like, that sounds really kind of strange to think that voting liberal is, a good thing, perhaps. But in the prairies, it's very conservative, and a lot of stigma against Indigenous people, against queer people, against all kinds of people that are different. And so that's my history. And I think those kinds of things make you who you are as you age. And certainly the LGBTQ community here has been through a lot. The political changes, we put a lot of pressure on that. And I think, as George mentioned, it happened mostly in Ottawa to the public service and RCMP and military. And the kind of draconian measures that were used to harass and intimidate and put fear into people is just astonishing. So we have that, I think, part of our history as we move forward. So we're very resilient, and we understand what other people go through in terms of stigma and discrimination and hatred and fear. And I do think that makes us able to be good allies for a lot of different groups that go through things. Certainly, we've seen many things change, and certainly politically, we notice those things and feel them tremendously. So I think, in the early days, when I actually came out when I was 34, so I wasn't very young either. I was sitting on a bench and telling this woman that I was in love with her. She was, a little bit, what? You're supposed to be my straight friend, But this fellow came up to us, and we were sitting on a park bench on Somerset Street West, and he came over to us very menacingly, and he was obviously quite drunk. And he said, "You're a couple of dykes, right?" And I'm going, "Ooh, I don't know." I just about fell off the bench. And she said, "Yeah, that's what we are. Would you like to talk to us about it?" Or something. And he just sort of mumbled something and walked away. But that was my introduction when I first came out. And that fear does not go away. I mean, it changes, it evolves. I get better with it. But yeah, it's still, there's still a lot of work to do. And I think with many issues, you have the wider messages, but then you have the reality of how people actually treat each other in different circumstances. So that's what I think Ottawa Senior Pride Network is really working on, how to build allyships with people who, are in this together with us. And our history helps us to organize our present and our future. So that's really what I wanted to say. I did some training early on in Pink Triangle Services that George mentioned as well. So it was a social service organization, and it has evolved over the years. But one of the things that we did was training, doing awareness sensitivity workshops with CSIS. So, and the head of CSIS came in the day that we were there, and he came in, he was a big fellow, he was like very intimidating. And he said to everybody, you listen to what these people from Pink Triangle Services have to say to you. They're the experts. You don't know anything. Participate all day long or you'll be in trouble. These people are telling you what you have to do now, because that was when the law changed and they could no longer discriminate against LGBTQ people. And that was really hard for them to figure out, because we've been chasing these guys for the past 30 years. And now we're supposed to embrace them? Like, how do you do that? So it was very, very interesting. And they were magnificent, actually. And so it shows to me how leadership, can help people to make those transitions even when they don't want to, because it's, there are various ways to help people to understand things. This is one way. But in those institutional setups, there have to be people on both sides of that equation to talk about it. So that was very instructive to me around, how wonderful and warm these guys were, and they were all men at the time. There were no women, but these were the ones that were doing the security checks for people coming into government and stuff. So it was really a lesson in building allyship from people you did not expect it from, and we had a great time. So, we've learned a lot in our process of growing in Ottawa Senior Pride around, building allyships and maintaining our messaging, keeping going, being resilient, working together with each other is just a really, really important lesson that we've learned. And we're a very vibrant community. So happy to be part of this today. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Jordyn.
Thank you much, Holly. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying really translates to really just the point of these webinars here with relationship building and allyship. So I thank you for the truth you've shared. And I'm just going to pass it back to George in case you have any other words to add, or any of the other panelists. Thank you.
So just to wrap it up, I think that you've heard a lot now about sort of the history of Ottawa. The other thing which is really, really good, there is a website which you can go to, and it's called villagelegacy.ca. So that's www.villagelegacy.ca. And it was a project which was done a couple of years ago, and it has all kinds of interviews with people, a lot of them from Senior Pride Network. It talks about those people that have the flags on Bank Street. It talks about the history, the bar scene. It has a huge, huge amount of things about Ottawa from our history right up to today. And like Bill was saying, there was this map that we did, these flags along Bank Street sort of reflect all of those little dots that were on that police chart. So it's quite interesting. So if anybody is interested, go and check out villagelegacy.ca, and there's tons and tons of LGBT history there for you. So that's the way I'd like to wrap up.
Thank you much, George. I'm gonna pass it on to Donna now, actually, so we can start our finishing circle, closing circle, debrief circle, whatever you'd like to call it.